Multnomah, past and present. This 1925 Multnomah Street scene was captured before the viaduct was built in 1927. It was taken at the corner of Capitol Highway and 35th and looking west. Here's a view of the same Multnomah location taken in the 1960s with the viaduct in place. This shot is also at the corner of Capitol Highway and 35th and looking west. These scenes of the Raz Brothers Dairy Farm are looking east and before the community of Hillsdale existed. This area is looking east at what is now Wilson High School, and Hoffman Road can be seen on the right. Looking west, we see the Multnomah Dairy on Hoffman Road, now named Vermont Street, which was the home of pioneer Henry Tandler. The Tandler home was located near the present-day Southwest Community Center at Southwest Vermont and 45th. Oregon Electric, the first railway, was built through part of what is now Southwest and West Portland. This is Multnomah's most familiar scene. The Oregon Electric built their line in 1907, with services beginning in 1908. The Multnomah Station was a wooden depot, as seen on the left. This event marked the beginning of the town of Multnomah, a station name chosen by the railway. Just east of the railroad station was the Bungalow Grocery, owned by Nelson Thomas, which was housed in what many consider the first business building in Multnomah. The building became the first post office in 1912 with Thomas as postmaster. Thomas kept a typical general store, and farmers came from miles around to get supplies of all kinds. Above the store was a large hall, which was used for public entertainment and community dances. The building would shake when the train went by. Thomas had a pair of horses, Dandy and Billy, about 1,100 pounds each, which drew his covered Studebaker deluxe delivery wagon. One day he took orders, and the next he delivered them. Thomas's store is now Marco's Restaurant at Southwest 35th and Multnomah Boulevard. This street scene is looking south on Southwest 35th Avenue. Thomas's original building was first enlarged and faced with brick and eventually moved north in 1914. The present building was built by T.E. Peer. This scene shows the building of the railroad west of Multnomah and looking to the east. Notice the fill that raised the railroad bed. This area is close to the present-day West Hills Village facility located on the north side of Multnomah Boulevard. This scene is North Main Street, Garden Home looking to the west. This is the Garden Home station with tracks on both sides. This area is now near the Old Market Pub. The structure was once Whitney's Custom Cannery. One of the earliest settlers of Multnomah was Matthew Barron, who had about 5 acres just north of Thomas Grocery on the other side of what is now Capitol Highway. This picture was taken about 1914 or 1915, looking south from his property. You can see the large building put up by the Pfeiffers with a dance hall on the second floor. Matthew Barron's first home was lost in a 1926 fire, but in 1927 he built this home, which still stands today near Southwest 35th Street and Southwest Canby Street. The home featured imported tiles and stained glass features from Italy. Barron then built this store and lean-to across what is now 35th Street. He then sold it to Lovejoy and Jackson, who started in the grocery business about 1914 next to Multnomah Station. Jackson later left Lovejoy and went southeast, diagonally across the street where he started a garage. After Mr. Jackson left, the store was then known as the Lovejoy Store. Mr. Lovejoy is shown here with customers inside his store. Lovejoy and Jackson, groceries, hardware, plumbing, and electrical supplies. Note the phone number on this 1917 calendar. Telephone service came to the area about 1915. This is a snow scene that gives us a view facing west before the bridge was built. The two buildings were used for early businesses in Multnomah. Weatherly's Grocery is shown here on Capitol Highway in Multnomah. This building is now part of the Thinker Toys shop. Mr. Weatherly purchased the store in 1920, as depicted in this drawing. That store was eventually torn down, and a new Weatherly's Grocery was built in 1930. In 1910, Mr. Thomas Hawley and his wife moved to Multnomah and started a small building materials business. In 1914, the post office was moved across the railroad tracks to his building looking east. This structure was built a few years later, and Hawley remained postmaster until 1936. Kalesi's new garage was built on this spot in the 1950s, at the southwest corner of Southwest 35th and what is now Multnomah Boulevard. Between 1912 and 1917, big changes occurred in the village. In 1912, there was no paved road, no school, no electricity, no gas, no telephone service, or good drinking water. Beginning in 1913, Portland's Bull Run water was piped in. Before the city water service started, the people used individual wells and storage tanks behind their buildings. But the water quality was usually poor, with the water being heavily charged with iron and sulfur. In 1915, the main road was paved. Also in 1915, the first electric service was installed in the area, though service was quite unreliable for some time. By 1916 through 1917, gas service became available. As these changes occurred, real estate developers saw the potential for this new little village and began staking out development areas. Note the telephone number is AT 1522. An almost new four-room house near the heart of Multnomah could be purchased for only $1,250 with reasonable terms and priced for immediate sale. Also listed are two modern houses for rent in Multnomah for $20 and $25 per month. The Multnomah News 1921 headlines read, "Buy vacant property at Multnomah. Lots listing at $400. Other ads include Ned Burke and his wife doing real estate, insurance, and notary public. M.S. Saunders also advertises Multnomah Electric Works, offering electrical wiring, repair, and supplies. Before 1915, transportation was on foot or by horse and buggy, and was needed just to get to the train station. The unpaved roads were a hazard in rainy weather, and though there were a few wooden sidewalks built in town, they were steep enough to be difficult to step up on. In 1915, the road going from Portland to West Portland was paved with concrete. This was the first concrete road in Oregon. It was named Capitol Highway as it was the road to the Capitol in Salem. It also served as a connection between Slavin Road and Taylor's Ferry Road. A jitney service was started by F.M. Reed on the new Capitol Highway in 1915. One trip a day to Portland was 25 cents round trip, and the one-way charge was 10 cents. The log cabin building can be seen on the right in the picture. The Capitol Highway view is facing east, with the Pfeiffer Building visible on the right. The Multnomah Garage was built in these early years. The owner from 1919 to 1921 was Roy Young, shown here on the right. The phone was Main 1207, and they pumped gasoline and sold Monogram oil and grease. This building currently houses Sip Divine and Multnomah Cleaners, and the alley on the right next to Renner's Cafe. This 1919 picture of the first school in Multnomah was taken looking west. The two portables were brought to Multnomah in 1913. Miss Kate Young was the first principal, with Margaret Carr being the first teacher. There were 38 pupils that first year, and the first graduating class was in February 1914, with 3 students receiving the first diplomas. Here we see a drawing of the portables after a third one had been added in later years. These portables are still in use at the Multnomah Center and can be found close to the rear of the building on the southwest side. Multnomah School was built in 1923, dedicated in 1924 with the first classes held that year. Notice how far back the school sits from the road. Here is a shot of the building in later years as many remember it. No parking signs looked different then. In the meantime, the business district was growing. Here is a large log cabin that was erected near the northeast corner of 35th and Capitol Highway. Apparently, it housed a real estate office and sold Made in Clover ice cream. In later years, Greg Owens Chevrolet and Bill Ryan's Thriftway did business at this site. Today, it is home to Paganwood Restoration. This log cabin was dismantled, moved, and rebuilt on a site in the Glen Cullen neighborhood. Looking west on Southwest 35th at Capitol Highway, we find Multnomah's first drugstore with Ben Wolf as proprietor. The pool hall was run by the 5 Pfeiffer brothers near the present Ship Tavern on Southwest 35th. This is a shot of Ellis Drugs, and we can see that the bridge has not yet been built. This 1920s Multnomah scene is looking west. Notice that Capitol Highway was a two-way street, and there was plenty of room for parking. The Multnomah Community Church was formed in 1920, and this building was dedicated on the 6th of November 1921 as Multnomah United Presbyterian Church. The color of the church was cream or ivory, and a large fire escape slide is out of sight on the far side of the building. In the late 1930s, a new entrance and addition was built with many helpers. Reverend Davis Sharp was the first minister, followed by Reverend Harry E. Moore, and then by Dr. John Nevin, who served for many years. The church faced southeast and was on the corner of Southwest 35th and Troy Streets. The church had several levels, with a lower level entrance shown on the left. Many a youngster arrived after school for youth club, and fudgesicles sold by Mrs. Nevin. In 1958, a new church was built on Southwest 45th near Multnomah Boulevard, where it is located today. Here is another view of Multnomah United Presbyterian Church, showing the sanctuary and narthex. This Multnomah scene was taken at the intersection of Southwest 36th and Capitol Highway. The Multnomah Presbyterian Church can be seen on the left side in the background. This Multnomah scene appears to have been taken from high on the bridge or on top of a building. The view is looking east on Capitol Highway. Notice the telephone poles appear to be almost in the street. Axel N. Swanson built this lovely home after purchasing the property in 1921. The Parker family home and the Presbyterian Church were to the right. This was the boyhood home of Multnomah historian and author Lowell Swanson. In 1923, before the bridge was built, Matthew Barron built and started this service station on the extreme west end of town. In addition to gasoline, Barron also sold confectionaries, cigars, tobacco, candy, and soft drinks. Doing business today at this same location, owned and operated Handy Andy's Service, a Multnomah institution. A local couple is shown using the standard mode of transportation as they pass in front of a log cabin circa 1922. In 1924, the Masons' new temple was completed across from Multnomah School. It was named Oronoma, since the name Multnomah had already been in use for the Masonic Lodge in Oregon City. In the 1980s, the members sold the lodge and merged with Tigard Masonic Lodge. Today, the popular Lucky Lab Brew Pub welcomes customers and their canine friends. In 1924, Multnomah had a big 4th of July celebration. This view is looking west from Southwest 35th and Capitol Highway. This scene is looking north, and we can just barely see a lunch and soft drinks sign from the spot where Renner's Cafe has done business for many years. In 1924, Multnomah's first bank opened at the old address of 3231 Capitol Highway. The Multnomah Commercial and Savings Bank failed and was closed by the end of 1934. Those were tough times in Multnomah, as well as for the rest of the country. In 1927, the Ellis Pharmacy tore down this old Pfeiffer building and moved to temporary quarters on 35th. Looking east on Southwest 35th, we see the Ellis Pharmacy temporary quarters. The building on the right, built in 1908, is now Parker Realty. The new building was built with a rental on the west side. And lastly, this is the Ellis Pharmacy that old-timers remember. The unusual design makes the building easy to identify today. By 1927, there had been a number of accidents on the west end of town involving passenger cars and the railway. The accidents occurred where Capitol Highway crossed the tracks. The viaduct, or bridge as some call it, was constructed by 1928. The narrow winding roads found on each side of the bridge today are actually the remnants of the old Capitol Highway. The bridge also boasted light posts for several years before they were removed. The Multnomah school children are lined up by their bus and ready for a field trip to the Oregon Historical Society, housed in the old Civic Auditorium lower level. This photo of Multnomah School is without a porch. The school buses would swing through the parking lot and drop and pick up students near the doors. It rains a lot in Oregon, so staying dry was the goal. Here is a class portrait of Multnomah graduates circa 1930s. The Multnomah graduating class of 1928 poses with diplomas in hand for their class photo outside the school, near the West Gym. The Hill Villa Bertha Multnomah bus stops near the west end of the viaduct. These little girls are all decked out for an outing. Ed Verdeman's service station was across from Multnomah School for many years. The Oronoma Masonic Lodge is shown in the background. Notice that it has more windows than in later years. Verdeman's gas station on Capitol Highway advertises Gilmore Gasoline and Quaker State Motor Oil. Verdeman's converted to Shell gasoline. Notice that the hoist to work on the car is in the side yard. The rooftops of the homes in the background are long gone and replaced with business buildings. Multnomah's Capitol Theater was always popular. It opened during the silent movie and vaudeville era. This 1935 program includes advertising from Copeland Lumber, Chick's Pharmacy, and Ross Motors. The theater was a happy place to go in the 1930s, as this program shows they even had double features. Saturday matinees were always a big hit with the local children. The theater experienced 3 fires, with the last one in the mid-1950s which closed it forever. This Multnomah street scene from the 30s is looking east. Multnomah grade school children sold these postcards. Note the angled parking. Dewey Bullock bought this shop at the southwest corner of Capitol Highway and 36th from John Vaderas in 1932. This is another shot of Dewey's shoe shop in Multnomah. The hardware store was just across 36th, and one can see the fenced area where roofing and fencing were stored. Dewey ran Multnomah Shoe Shop until he passed away in 1958. This view, circa 1951, is looking south with Gaylock's Beauty Shop next door. Bullock's Shoe Shop has a new, updated look. This Multnomah scene includes the Multnomah Garage and Crybaby Cafe on the north side of Capitol Highway. Started in 1923 as John's Meat Market, later known as John's Market, it would stay in this location until 1958. The new John's Market on Multnomah Boulevard and 35th opened in 1958 near the location of the old Multnomah train station. The Fuse family were in business in Multnomah for more than 68 years. This is the old Multnomah Garage as it became in the 30s. It eventually became Walt Beardsley's Garage and then Beardsley's Auto Parts Store. The Crybaby Cafe location is the current Renner's Cafe. Greg Owens Chevrolet wasn't the first auto dealer in Multnomah, but they were the last. They moved from this location at Southwest Capitol and 35th into a new showroom and dealership at 8350 Southwest Barber Boulevard, not far from the old 3-star restaurant and lounge. The dealership later became Ron Tonkin Chevrolet and eventually moved across town to Auto Row. Multnomah locals entered a Rose Festival float in the Grand Floral Parade in 1932. Multnomah built this float in 1930 to honor Multnomah native Carolyn Hahn. She was the first Rose Queen chosen from a high school. Students from the Multnomah area attended Lincoln in those days. The 1940s and 1950s were building and changing years for Multnomah. We see the Ben Franklin Variety Store, Borden's Jewelry, Trailers Apparel, Ed's Camera Corner, Cotton's Cafe, and an unidentified lady properly dressed for a shopping trip. A lady wore a hat in those days. This Multnomah scene covers the other side of the street with Renner's Grill, a beauty shop, and real estate office. The disruption appears to be a sewer or water main project. Today we find Thinker toys at Southwest Capitol Highway and 35th, shown partially on the left in this scene. To the right we see a doctor office, beauty shop, and the Thomas building in the distance. This was taken during Multnomah's antique store period. Here we see Multnomah Pharmacy with Ed's Camera Corner, Laurie and Casey's Antiques, which was once the Multnomah Bank and is now O'Connor's Annex. The 1944 Capitol Theater's monthly program gives us an idea of the films shown during World War II. This Capitol Theater program from 1944 lists the phone number as Cherry 9090. Be sure to notice the admission prices of 15 cents and 35 cents plus tax for a double feature showing. The ads include Multnomah Drug, Charm Cottage Beauty Care, Paul M. Rising Insurance, and Gaylock Beauty Salon. Here we see the Multnomah Drug Store, which was owned and operated by W.A. Siegfried until 1945. At that time, he sold the business to pharmacist Don Germain. The store included a fountain and also Ed's Camera Corner. The drugstore was in business for some time before it finally closed in the 1950s. And here we see the Ed's Camera Corner sign indicating that Ed had moved his business to a new location. Colvin started his camera shop business in 1950. Ed's Camera Corner occupied various locations in Multnomah over the years, but started in Multnomah Drug. Cotton's ice cream shop was originally Al Calls for Ice Cream, which he started in Multnomah in March 1941. Al Call then sold to Clarence Cotton in 1952. Many a schoolchild recalls stopping at Cotton's for a Green River or vanilla Coke. Booth service was reserved for big spenders, so kids took the stools at the counter. This view shows the inside of Ed's Camera Corner. Here we see Ed's covered bridge photos displayed in his camera shop. Ed's slot car tracks proved to be very popular with the local kids. Another shot of Ed's Camera Corner sign when he was part of Rexall Drug. Ed advertised his camera corner on his parked car on Southwest Troy Street. The Multnomah Bank opened in February 1948. This was the forerunner of today's Key Bank, located at Southwest 35th and Troy Street. This snow scene photo is Southwest 35th Street facing south. These Multnomah scenes are looking east from the viaduct. On the right we see Stacy's Cleaners, a beauty shop, and Bullock's shoe store. This view shows the U.S. Postal Service Multnomah branch. The old post office building then became an OLCC store for a time before the liquor store moved to its present location at Southwest Barber Boulevard in Capitol. The little white building to the left was the Multnomah County Library for many years. Needing more space, the post office moved to two locations on Southwest Troy Street before moving to its present location on Southwest 40th Street and Multnomah Boulevard. Here we have a scene of Multnomah in 1947 at the corner of 35th Street and Capitol Highway. Cars are parked on both sides of the street with two-way traffic on Capitol Highway. The Thrifty Grocery and later Bill Ryan's Thriftway did business at the northeast corner of Capitol Highway and Southwest 35th until the early 60s. This is quite a scene of congestion and parked cars. This same building has been the home of Paganwood Refinishing for quite a few years. Here's another view of Bill Ryan's Thriftway. It must be quite a sale. The Multnomah United Presbyterian Church can be seen on the left side in this picture. The Multnomah Fire Department No. 3 began in 1939. A wide variety of fire trucks and equipment are displayed here. The town was so proud of all the volunteer firemen and also the Tualatin Valley Ambulance Service. The community maintained and supported these services for many years. Local girls are shown here with one of the Multnomah fire engines. The old firehouse is now the home of Neighborhood House. The Tualatin Valley Ambulance is shown here in front of Wilson High School. The community supported and maintained the ambulance service for many years. Here we see the Tualatin Valley Ambulance crew hard at work in front of Beardsley's Auto Parts, with Multnomah Cleaners and Renner's Grill in the background. In the early years, the Tualatin Valley Ambulance was parked under the viaduct for easy access by the volunteers. In later years, the service moved to this location on Southwest Multnomah Boulevard. Multnomah Days was always and still is a lot of fun, and we had a great Chamber of Commerce. Local merchants appear to be having a lot of fun in this shot, and we see Witcher's Printing and Multnomah Drug in the background. Local merchants really got into the spirit of the occasion as they bravely set up their teepee in this Capitol Highway intersection. The locals appear to be really getting into the Multnomah Days spirit. Crawford's apparel can be seen in the background, and one-way